5 years ago today, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And in the type 1 community, we call that a diaversary. Now, while I think it's weird to celebrate a chronic illness that is far more clingy and high maintenance than anyone I've ever been with, I do think it's cool to see how far we've come over the years. Now, if you all want to hear the story of how I got diagnosed with type 1 at age 21 and all that, let me know. But in this video, I just want to focus on what I've learned from diabetes over the years. So without further ado, here are 5 things I've learned in 5 years of being a type 1 diabetic. One of the most important things I've learned with 5 years of diabetes is health. And I realize that sounds vague and broad. So what I mean by that is what influences and impacts your individual health. And it has been fascinating to have my eyes open to everything that can impact your health. See, for type 1 diabetics, managing type 1 is all about blood sugar level. And a lot of us will wear CGMs or continuous glucose monitors that will tell us our blood sugar level every 5 minutes. And so we'll get these charts on our phones or on our watch that will have our blood sugar going up, down, depending on the time of day, depending on what we're eating. And a lot of what we do in terms of when we eat, when we take insulin, when we can exercise, is based off of this graph. And so I remember prior to being diagnosed, I thought health was just you eat healthy and you exercise. And while I think those are two very important fundamentals, I realized there's so much more to health than just the food that you eat and what you do for exercise. And as I merged into all of a sudden, I had to switch my whole lifestyle up when I was diagnosed. And now my life was literally put on a graph on my phone. Like if that line went too low, I was in serious trouble. If it went high, I was in serious trouble. And so it was this weird mental shift of like, okay, I'm watching my well-being on this graph. And it wasn't just food that impacted that graph. It was sleep, it was stress. And to go into each of those, sleep, for instance, if you didn't get a good night's sleep the night before, and specifically, this is kind of a trigger warning for me because my wife and I had our first baby this past year, and so sleep has been elusive to say the least. But all of those nights where we're up for hours and then you go about your day the next day like you're a functioning human being, I would watch my blood sugars be all over the place. And it was so frustrating because I knew there wasn't really anything I could do about the sleep. Like I needed to be there to help my wife and help our son. But no matter how hard I tried to nail my doses of insulin, I couldn't do it. And so some days were a lot better than others. This isn't like never have kids because you won't sleep and your blood sugars will be all over the place. It's not what I'm saying. But I think anyone who has had a crazy sleep schedule or knows what it's like to wake up after an awful night's sleep and then go about your day and watch your blood sugars just be all over the place. It's like the last thing you want. It's like, come on, like I had that bad night's sleep. Can you please just give me like a nice day in range? So sleep has always been an interesting one for me, but I was fascinated to see how it impacted my blood sugar levels and in turn how I felt throughout the day. The next one I think is even more fascinating, and that's stress. Because when I think of stress, I don't really see it as like a physical health element, but I can count dozens of times in my life when there's been a huge report, a huge project, something at work, or even having a baby, like these major life events that stress me out so much. and I'll watch my blood sugar levels just creep up and just be at a way higher plateau than they normally are. Same amount of insulin, same amount of food, same amount of exercise. I'm pretty much doing the same things, but that stress is so powerful mentally that it literally can spike your blood sugar levels. And so, zooming out, I found myself looking at health as a much more holistic thing. And I was so glad to have that kind of eye-opening experience through diabetes of health isn't just eating chicken and broccoli and doing some push-ups. It encompasses everything. And being able to watch my well-being, and I say that lightly because not everything about me is on a CGM blood sugar chart that I get to see on my phone. But it is interesting to see how my mood and overall ability to work and be functional depends on where that graph is. So that's been a really cool kind of eye-opening lesson that I've learned about health from diabetes. So the next one is patience. And this one has been very frustrating to learn, and I haven't like learned patience. I think that's a lifelong endeavor. But the ability that type 1 has to get you at your worst moment or be such an inconvenience that it's almost laughable has taught me a great deal of patience. I can't count how many times I've been so excited to go to the gym. I took I got off work or made a special trip to go to the gym, had it all scheduled, have my workout planned, and then I walk in the doors and start warming up and my blood sugar just tanks. And the frustrating thing about it is yes, like your blood sugar is low, you feel awful. That part is bad. But the worst part is you can't power through a low. And when I say like you can't just muscle your way through low blood sugar. And prior to my diagnosis, I was all about, you know, push through your limits, nothing can stop you. And here I am 2 years later in the gym. I haven't even touched a weight yet. My blood sugar drops and I can't even function. I'm like shivering, but sweating and shaking, and it's just awful. So I I still, this like gets to me because I just had this happen the other day where I was really excited to go work out. It was later in the day. It was pretty much the only time I had left to get my workout in for the day, and my blood sugar just tanked. And the only thing you can do is eat. And the problem with that is for type 1 diabetics, like if you're treating a serious low, it is pretty difficult to bring your blood sugar back up to just a normal level. A lot of times you'll overtreat a low and then your blood sugar will go too high. And then working out is even harder. A lot of times it'll be a really stubborn low and you'll eat a bunch of food that you think will get you to a normal level, but it won't be enough. And so you'll stay low. And now it's been 45 minutes. It's too late for you to get your full workout in, and you wasted all that time shoving your face with candy, and you're like, how is this even healthy? Like I had such good intentions and they were just ruined. And so I think diabetes has such a way of, it doesn't wait up for you, it doesn't care what you think, it doesn't care what you're doing. It's its own beast, and being able to navigate that is impressive. And so I want to shout out all you type 1 diabetics and anyone struggling with any autoimmune disease, for coping with the inconvenience, because that is such a massive thing that we have to negotiate every day of our lives. And I find myself thinking frequently how nice it would be if I didn't have type 1. If I could just feel the same and be kind of flatline instead of all these ups and downs and this roller coaster of highs and lows. But on the other side, I'm very glad that it teaches me patience. And I feel like I've become a lot more adaptable to situations because of it. Prior, I felt like I was a little more controlling, and now I'm okay with things changing because so many times it changes for me and I'm the one. And so it's been hard but good to learn patience. The next thing I've learned from diabetes goes hand in hand with patience, and it's resilience. And this is one I'm particularly fond of because of how I've seen it impact my life, especially in the things that I've wanted to accomplish. Because I've always had big dreams. I I don't want to say it's a character flaw because I love it, but it comes with some pros and cons. And I remember when I was diagnosed, I was initially so happy that I knew what was wrong with me. But when all the kind of education started happening and I learned about what type 1 is and how it can affect you, I remember that feeling of heaviness and something like sunk inside of me that I was like, what happened to those dreams that I had? Like, will I be able to accomplish any of that? Or do I just need to change my life? Like, the goals that I had. And while some of that is wrapped around me personally, and I love physical activity and doing marathons and challenging myself physically, another aspect was like, what about my children? Like, are they going to have type 1? And that was a very real moment for me. That was fun fact. That was the first question I asked after my diagnosis, was if my kids were going to have it. Because I'm okay with me having it. I, like I said in the patience bit, I think I've learned to adapt, and you don't really have a choice. You can't just say you're not diabetic anymore. Um, but like my children, I I never wanted to feel like it was my fault, and I still kind of struggle with that. But I remember thinking, I'm not going to let diabetes hold me back, and the resilience that that takes for anyone, regardless of if you're just trying to be consistent at your job or be consistent at school, or socially, or with taking insulin and managing your blood sugars. There is so much resilience that comes with managing type 1. And I really do think that all the hashtags and the campaigns around like type 1 warriors is powerful because it's a beast of a disease. And the people that it creates, who are strong and willing to persist and be resilient to all the inconveniences and annoyances of Dexcom alarms going off at the most inconvenient times, or lows happening when you're trying to work out, or any of the litany of other things that type 1 can make inconvenient. We have the ability to power through that. And I think it's incredible. And I've learned an unbelievable amount about resilience because there's no choice but to push forward. Because if we just gave in to diabetes and said, you know what, do your thing, let our blood sugars go out of control, that is not a pretty picture. And so it literally takes resilience and effort on our part to actively do a lot of management. Type 1 diabetes is not a passive disease. It takes active management. And so I applaud all diabetics who are managing their blood sugars and trying to work through this, because resilience carries over into so many other aspects of life. And I think type 1 diabetes makes someone resilient. This next one is a little interesting, and I hope some of you can relate to it. And that's that diabetes has taught me about self care, but not really in the way that I think of self care. Prior to my diagnosis, I would consider myself someone who didn't really care if I got hurt, and if we were ever in a group situation and something happened, I was I didn't really like care what happened to me. Like, not to be a hero or anything, but it was always very much about helping other people. And I think a lot of people are like that, and especially in the type 1 community, I feel like I see so many people who are trying to help others. So something that I had to learn was how to take care of myself, and not just take care of myself, but prioritize myself when I need it. And that has been a difficult lesson to learn, because it's not natural. And so I think about my son, who is almost a year old, and you can probably hear him screaming in the background of this video. But I think about how I have had times where I'm carrying him, and I'll feel my blood sugar go low and I need to eat something, and it's like I literally have to put him down and take care of myself, and he could be crying cuz he's hungry, and I have to prioritize myself, cuz if I don't treat a low, I go lower and it gets dangerous. And so it's been this weird shift of I now hold a higher priority, not because of who I am or anything that I've done or status or any of that. It's literally health. Like I have to prioritize myself, or my health is in question. And that, I don't mean that to sound scary or anything, but it's definitely eye opening to have those experiences where I I can't go out, or we have to be late to this thing that my wife is really excited about going to, or we need to be on time to, and it's like I have to treat this low. And again, bringing in the other lessons that I've learned from diabetes, patience is a huge one when it comes to self-care, because in those moments where I do have to choose myself and say, "Hey, listen, like I'm low, I I have to communicate that, and it takes patience for me to like just I can't even think logically when I'm low. So my mind is just like get me food and get me food now. And then I'm trying to communicate it to my wife, who's upset because she's like, "We're late, we have to go." I'm like, I literally I can't. And that's frustrating. Um but prioritizing myself in situations like that, has definitely taught me a level of self care that I didn't really think I would ever learn. And I'm grateful that I have, because I think to some extent, you do have to make sure that you're in a good place before you can go and help others or go and participate in different activities. And so it's taught me that there's a hierarchy of things that need to be in order before you can move forward. And specifically with type 1 diabetes, if you're low or high, um, those need to be treated before you move forward. And so self care has been an interesting one, but I'm grateful that I've learned it, and never thought I would have. And man, there are so many lessons and things that I've learned from type 1 that coming up with a list of five has actually been kind of difficult, and especially doing it off the cuff like this. But the fifth one I would choose is gratitude. And I say that with a big asterisk over it, because I know all of us are probably in a different spot with our own selves. And in this specific case, a lot of type 1 diabetics are probably in a different spot with how they view their type 1. And I remember initially when I was diagnosed, again, I was happy. I was like, okay, I know what I'm fighting. I know this is a legit disease. It's not me going to doctors and doing all this blood work and not knowing. Now I know. So I'm grateful and also frustrated. Like, why me? Why at 21 years old? It was so out of the blue. And I remember being frustrated initially of like, why why do I have to go through this? Like I've been able to live 21 years of my life, and all of a sudden, like, just pops up, and now I'm half robot and basing all of my actions off a chart on my watch. Like, huge life switch. But after I got over that kind of initial frustration and started learning more about diabetes and watched my A1C come down to a healthy level, I really started to be grateful for it. And I think it took some perspective shift of realizing all the lessons that I was learning from it. Because again, there are a lot of inconveniences, there are a lot of annoying things about type 1, but ultimately, I feel like I'm a healthier person because of it. I'm managing my sleep better. I'm not doing, well, I'm still doing some crazy physical stuff, but I don't think I have the same mentality that I used to of you have to push through every workout and force yourself to be so tired that your muscles are spasming and you're throwing up. Like, it's not about that. And so I think type 1 has taught me so many lessons, and for that I need to be grateful. And not only that, but I'm grateful that I live right now, because living with type 1 diabetes 100 years ago looked like 6 feet under. So I'm immensely grateful that not only can we live past our infancy with type 1, I'm grateful that we can thrive with type 1. And I look at the things that I'm doing and have done and want to do to prove that diabetes shouldn't hold you back. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that opportunity. I'm grateful for the challenge that that is. I'm grateful for everything that type 1 has taught me. And it's been an absolutely frustrating and beautiful journey, to say the least. But with 5 years of diabetes under my belt, I can confidently say that I love, wow. I was about to say I love being a type 1 diabetic. And weirdly, I mean it, but I would never choose to be. And I want to convey that difference, that because I am, I'm proud, and it's not like I can regret anything or say like I'm not just going to be a diabetic anymore. Um, I love being a type 1 diabetic, and I'm grateful for it. And anyone who's struggling with diabetes, I plead that you can see some of the same lessons that I've learned and understand that you can be healthy with type 1. Type 1 doesn't have to hold you back. Yes, it's a part of you, and it doesn't mean it is you. And keep going one by one.